since we're kind of on the topic of technical issues in sound design, does game sound design have the same problem like that films do, where like films have to be output in so many different formats? You have to mix for IMAX, you have to mix for headphones, you have to mix for the theater, you have to mix for your TV, you have to mix for the phone speakers. Like, how do you deal
Atmos.
Atmos. Like, how do you deal with making the game sound right on all these different speakers and different audio output devices?
I haven't been getting involved in that
a
lot lately, but yeah, it's a thing. Ideally, you have the ability to listen in all those formats.
Well, yeah, there's that to be the right equipment.
I've been lucky enough to work at places where we had sound rooms that I had full surround setups. I mean, more modern games and game engines and sound systems in games, a lot of that stuff happens. Like, you just set the setting. If something's supposed to happen behind you, like if I have a sound coming from something in the game, it comes from behind me from the emitter. But yeah, it needs to be tested in the environment.
Yeah.
So it's a QA thing, really. I think I got the question right.
Yeah.
It's how do you handle the various types of listening environments that are required. One really maddening thing at PlayStation would be, for a while, I can remember, different people would have different home theater systems, and we kind of have to think, like, what's the most popular way people are listening to our games? And I feel like when HDMI came out, there started to be ways to actually know what people were listening on. Like, I think the PlayStation could send back to the mothership what type of audio setups people had just based on the HDMI data. And so we could at least make informed decisions on what was the highest priority listening environment to focus on. I mean, you want the game to sound good on everything.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do, like one of the Naughty Dog games, and they probably still do this, there was a, we were lucky enough to have an audio programmer over there, and he would handle a lot of that stuff, like in the user settings, where if the user said they had headphones, the mix would have a different stereo width, because on headphones, oh God, I'm going to make myself sound like a noob here, but I'm pretty sure when you're listening on headphones, you can make stereo less wide than if you're listening on speakers, because your headphones are separated physically. The sound going in this ear is less likely to get to this ear because the headphone is, whereas speakers, it's crossing. So the width can be different for headphones than it can be for speakers. And so there was a manual user setting.
A lot of games have that.
Nowadays, I think the thing knows already what you're using.
Sort of. I mean, I see that setting on a lot of games where it says, like, you have to pick the output device. A lot of PlayStation games seem to have that. So
yeah, it got a little weird for a while, because when people started getting 5.1 and then 7.1 systems, and then you get people on forums complaining they can't hear any dialogue, and you start panicking, and you realize, oh, well, this person has their settings as stereo.
Yeah.
Or no, this person has set their audio settings to 5.1, which then includes a center speaker, and that's where we're piping all the dialogue. They can't hear the dialogue because their game is actually stereo. Their audio system's stereo, but people would start choosing 5.1 because it just sounded like, it'll sound better if I choose that, but they only had stereo speakers. So there was a lot of jank, I guess, when you go between what's a popular way, what's always been popular, to a new way of listening. And I think when surround systems started to become available, it used to be more of a problem to be able to make sure your players were hearing things correctly. And it's not as much a problem today.
Yeah, I've been dealing with a lot of positional audio stuff, doing a lot of like VR stuff, and it's interesting to be like, I feel like, this is a total aside, and I kind of feel like Dolby has really missed the boat on making Atmos a standard in games, because they charge the developer to use Atmos, which I think is weird. It's like, in fact, I think on the Xbox, the user has to pay to download the Atmos. Maybe that's not still the case, but I believe in the Xbox Series X or whatever, you have to pay to unlock Atmos. So they charge a license fee for the user and the developer. I could be wrong, but
it's kind of minor though. It's like buying an app or something. But
and it's just like, and I don't know why. I feel like if Dolby let developers use Atmos for free, they'd sell a lot more Atmos gear because games would have it. I don't really understand the business model. Like, so as a result, I have to use all these wacky half-abandoned spatialization plugins because a lot of times there's just not a lot. I don't know about you, but there's just not a lot of interest in spatial audio to a certain degree. So a lot of these plugins just go abandoned.
Yeah,
and it's
really, a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of focus on making the sound behave realistically as it would in the real world. And I was just talking to a DSP coder actually at GDC about this. He was saying how early in his career he got really hyper focused on, and I've done this too. I'm not a coder or DSP coder, but there's this thing where you just kind of your technical mind gets excited about the idea of, wow, I could make the sound do exactly what it does in real life. But when the practicality of calculating all the possible things that need to be calculated to do room reflections and stuff, not that it can't be done. I think there's shortcuts to doing it though.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think most of the...
But then it turns out there's even creative shortcuts where you don't need to represent every single... What matters is what you hear and whether your ear believes it.
Well, that's another thing too. So sound in real life isn't as interesting as it is in movies or games, right? You have to fake a lot, like the fall off and all these things. Like you have to kind of pump that up really to be exciting.
Well, yeah, you want to be able to... Sure, I don't know. I feel like it changes depending on the context of what you're conveying. Sometimes... It will sound just like it does in real life, but then there's other times where you need control. You need sliders for every parameter you can have. You need ways to make things like more bass or less bass because something gets closer or farther away, or high end, low end. Like there's things you can automate for that.
Yeah.
To happen, or you want to override it manually because there's a thing happening in the game. You want to make it more dramatic.